Hi, my name is Erik. I'm a principal consultant on the engineering transformation team at Pluralsight. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the easiest ways to get into free and open source software, especially for folks who are at the beginning of their technology career. Getting involved in the free and open source community early in your career is a very smart move for many reasons. The first is that when you help others, you will almost always get help in return. You also make connections that might last your entire career, helping you down the road in ways you won't even anticipate. But how do you get started when you're right at the beginning of your career? While imposter syndrome is something nearly all of us deal with, even after years of experience, it's true, it's very real when you're just starting out. Here's my position. Don't let your inexperience stop you from getting into open source. Instead, why not turn that lack of experience into a valuable asset? Now, what do I mean? Your point of view as a beginner is actually really hard to reproduce later in your career. And it makes you an ideal person to write great developer documentation. All too often, the creators and maintainers of an open source project write documentation that assumes a lot of prior knowledge or experience as an engineer or in the exact subject of their technology. And that's understandable. Once you know something at a really deep level, it can be hard to put yourself back into the mindset you had before you knew all that stuff. But this sometimes means that the documentation they make for getting up to speed with the awesome technology tool they're creating is a bit difficult to follow for someone new to the subject. And not surprisingly, even experienced engineers may find that sort of documentation frustrating. After all, they are usually new to that technology as well. So my point is that as a developer new to the industry, not just to that tool, you bring a vital perspective with really important questions that you're trying to answer. Questions like, what is this technology in a nutshell? And what are some similar technologies I might already be familiar with? Also, how do I get started with it in a greenfield or a new development project? How do I integrate it into an existing project? And finally, what does a real-world example of this technology actually look like? Now, these are, of course, questions that free and open source software project maintainers often anticipate when they write the documentation. But because they already know many of the answers to these questions, they may assume their new users do as well. Because you don't know the answers, you'll make sure they are there in the documentation you write. So you'll solve a problem the maintainers may not even know they have. And this kind of contribution to open source projects is extremely valuable. Insufficient or missing documentation can actually hurt a project's chances to gain widespread adoption and to scale. Most new potential users of the technology will quickly skim the documentation to see if it's going to fit their needs and to get an idea of how hard it might be to use. So documentation is actually the first impression for an open source project in most instances. So a project's success can hinge on this one point. Now, the good news is the many open source maintainers already know this is a weak point in their projects, and they often create issues focused just directly on documentation. Also, the collaborative, helpful culture of free and open source software means that maintainers are often receptive to unsolicited offers of help, especially in this documentation area. So, how can you tell if this kind of contribution to open source would actually be a good fit for you? Let's talk about the kind of skills you'll need to have or to develop to really make a difference in open source documentation. Now, you might be thinking that the most important skill you can bring to the table is to be an excellent writer. And to be sure, that is quite important. However, you can always have a friend with good editing skills review your work. In my experience, though, it's even more important that you be able to adopt the viewpoint of your reader and to communicate to them in a simple, clear manner. What I've found is that technical writing doesn't need to be dry. After all, you're writing for an audience of people, not machines. So you'll need to become good at having empathy and understanding of your audience. So how do you do this? Well, as you learn more about the projects you want to contribute to, you should try to understand not just the technical aspects of the code, but also the users of that code. Ask yourself, where are they in their career path? What would they be using this technology for? Individual projects, or possibly a team project that has to integrate into a full software development lifecycle technology stack? Are they considering adopting this technology to replace something else already in use? What you'll find is that the more you understand the users and their environment, the better you'll be able to write to them, to their needs, to their existing technology background, to their existing challenges, their particular challenges. So ultimately, the qualifications to do this sort of work are pretty simple. You should be able to write and to put yourself in another person's shoes. Now let's talk about how to get started with the actual work of contributing to documentation in open source. Often, you can just simply reach out to a maintainer offering to contribute. You should check their website, the website for your favorite open source project. I check out the repository. You'll get content information there. Just reach out and ask. You may find that many projects keep a list of known issues. Often you can find a task that fits your knowledge and experience level simply by scanning through all the available issues on a project. In addition, many maintainers will take the time to mark specific issues in that list as being better for new contributors. Now, many people do this in different ways, so you can look for them in the repository, but you might need to take a close look at the various tags or filters used to categorize issues for the project. That'll be time well spent, though. You can find some really great tasks to work on. And there are other sources of finding work as well, including word of mouth, as you develop a reputation for clean, effective work. Regardless of where you find the work, you'll need to reach out to the maintainers and ask if you can take on an issue here. Which brings up a really important note I'd like to give, and it applies to all work you'll ever do in open source, and frankly, just to working technology. Remember to be respectful of the time of maintainers and your fellow contributors in open source. Like you, most of these people are doing this work in their off time. And even if that's not the case, they likely have a lot of things on their plate. So don't spam them with excess communication, and please do treat them with respect and with kindness. All right, so you found an issue to work on a project you love, and the maintainer is giving you the go-ahead to do the work. What now? The basic process for doing the actual work is the same for nearly all projects, but please be sure to read any contributing guidelines that might exist for special notes for your project. In general, the process looks like this. 1, fork the project repository. 2, create or edit the documentation issue you've taken on, do the actual work. 3, submit a pull request for your work. And 4, wait for feedback. Now, like any other technical process, and there is a technical process here, the details matter a lot. If you're not yet comfortable with Git or with working with pull requests, please do practice those skills a bit before you get started. A professional knows the tools of their trade, and these are the tools you'll use in nearly every project you contribute to in open source. So it's worth taking a little time to learn them well. Now, that said, let's examine each of those steps in just a little bit more detail. First, forking the project repository. Here, you're going to create your own local copy of the project repo to do your work on. Please be sure to read any special instructions in the project's README file on how to get the project up and running. Specifically, you should check to see how the project maintainers implement branching in their code base. Is there a branch just for documentation? Should every documentation task be done in its own separate branch? Is there a naming convention for branches? These questions matter. Now on to doing the actual documentation work. As you're solving the issue you've taken on, keep a few things in mind. 1, pay attention to any writing style guidelines provided for this project. Are there rules around grammar, capitalization, punctuation, naming conventions for variables, classes, function names, this sort of thing? 2, if you encounter aspects of the documentation that you think should be changed, but which aren't part of the issue you've taken on, don't just fix them then and there on your own. Now, you can let the maintainer know about your recommendations, for sure. They'd probably appreciate it, but try to keep your work here confined to just the issue you took on. Now let's move on to submitting a pull request. Now that you've finished your documentation work, you'll ask the project maintainers to review your work and hopefully merge it into the repository. So here are a few important things to keep in mind as you create and work with pull requests. Branch comparison. One of the most common mistakes we make in creating pull requests is choosing the wrong branches we want to merge together. I've done it myself. So pay very close attention to this when making your pull request. Then there's giving your pull request a title and a description. Don't be overly wordy. You can explain your approach, but you should let your work speak for itself. Maintainers are often very tight on time. Make your pull request easy to review and easy to read. Now, waiting for feedback. You're likely very anxious to hear back on your pull request, especially if it's your first contribution. Please check contributor guidelines on your project for what to expect here. Often, it'll be a while until you hear back, and maintainers, they may not want you to nudge them excessively. And believe me, if there are any points to address in your pull request, you'll be notified. Do try to respond quickly to any comments on your pull request. Maintainers really appreciate this. And if you do need to edit your work, do so promptly and then commit your changes right away. You probably won't need to notify the maintainer you've committed new changes. The source control management platform they use will notify them of your commits so they can look at the pull request again, but check the contributor guidelines on this point. So once you're done and your work is part of the project repository, first, give yourself a well-deserved congratulations and a pat on the back, and then find another issue and keep on going. All right, so you've gotten started. Let's say you've successfully taken on a few documentation issues and the project maintainers are really happy with your work and you're finding that you really enjoy it. You want to do more. How do you get better at this kind of work and make an even bigger difference in developer documentation for the projects that you love? Well, here are a few pointers at getting really good at documentation. As you gain experience in this area and do more and more work, you'll start to notice aspects of a project's documentation that could benefit from your help, sometimes even before the project maintainer sees them. You should learn to look for these types of issues. Look to see if certain features are just totally undocumented, or critical information is missing in the documentation. Sometimes you might find that there are undefined technical terms in the materials that are actually making it hard for new people to understand the technology. Look to find out if some of the content is outdated, if it applies to previous versions. Or look to see whether the documentation is composed of very large files rather than smaller, tightly focused modules, each of which addresses one thing and addresses it well. So if you identify these or any other issues in the project that you think will benefit the projects you work on, get in touch with the project maintainers and make your case. And be kind, of course. No maintainer is going to want to hear about things they didn't think of. Instead, let them know what you love about the project and how your ideas might make it even better. Another idea is to work with other new contributors. As you start to know your way around a project, offer your help to other developers who are getting started in open source and want to help with documentation. This leads right into another area you can help with, which is contributor guidelines. As you get better and better at documentation work, and you work with more and more people, you'll develop valuable insight into what project maintainers can do to make things easier for themselves and for new contributors who want to help. If you can create or expand the contributor guidelines for a project, you'll help everyone involved. Finally, you can learn a lot about good documentation by finding examples of docs that have really helped you in your own journey as a developer. Pull those back up, analyze them to work out for yourself why they were so helpful to you. And then work out how to integrate those successful approaches into your own documentation work. And always remember, the fact that you may be early in your career is actually an asset here. Even for experienced engineers, The first time they try out a new technology, they'll have to overcome many of the same hurdles you did. We're all beginners at something. And in technology, we're beginners at something over and over and over again. All right, as we begin to wrap up, let's talk about how to move beyond working on documentation and starting to work on issues in the project code base itself. As you work on these documentation issues, take the time to study the technologies they address. Whenever possible, you should try to set up the project locally on your machine and get it up and running. When you're documenting aspects of a specific feature or of a section of the code, use that feature or step through the code in your code editor. You should always seek to understand, be interested. If you do this, you'll probably be surprised and honestly amazed at how quickly your knowledge level will rise. And not just for that specific project, but for engineering concepts as a whole. You will become a better developer by working on this. So before long, you're going to find an actual code issue you want to tackle. Be brave and grab a hold of it. You can get help. Often you can find another contributor to that same project who can help you with those first few code issues you work on. You'll probably pay that forward in the future. Eventually, you'll probably be taking on more complex features and bugs, and often a larger role in the project as a whole. So what do you stand to gain by jumping in and taking on project documentation work in open source? First, you'll be improving your favorite technologies. Second, you'll help every future developer adopt those technologies more easily. Third, you'll build your own coding and engineering skills. And fourth, you'll develop great relationships with like-minded, helpful, awesome people. So I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to listen to this talk. And honestly, I really hope it helps you in your journey to engineering excellence. And it can be a collaborative journey. It's not traveled alone. What I found is that technology is an awesome career to the degree that we as individuals work to make it that way. So from me to you, your interest in being part of that is seen and appreciated. So if you have questions, or if you just want to talk about the subject, I'll be in the class chat after this. Please join me. I'd love to meet you. Thank you, and good luck.